In the heart of the Galactic Academy, a figure loomed, his presence commanding the attention of every cadet in the hall. Commander Dranok, his scales glistening under the dim lights, activated the holoprojector with a flick of his clawed hand. The room darkened, and a massive, ominous projection of a human warship, the Iron Reaper, hovered in the air before the assembled cadets. It was a ship of legend, feared across the galaxy, and Dranok's voice, deep and gravelly, echoed through the vast chamber. Humans. They are unlike any other species we've encountered, he began, his voice filled with both bitterness and respect. His gaze swept over the eager young officers, future leaders of the Galactic Coalition, each one hoping to glean knowledge from the seasoned warrior. You think their warships are what make them terrifying? You're wrong. Dead wrong. The cadets watched intently as Dranok stepped closer to the flickering image of the warship, its hulking, angular form designed for one purpose: destruction. He pointed at the projection, his sharp eyes narrowed. This is called the Iron Reaper. Humans don't waste time on sleek designs or fancy systems. They don't care about energy efficiency or elegance. They build for one purpose: to destroy everything in their path. A cadet near the front, his tendrils trembling with the excitement of youth, raised a tentacle. "But sir," he asked, his voice barely contained, "how can humans survive when their fleets are so small? We've studied their numbers, they're vastly outmatched." Dranok's lips twisted into a grim smile. Numbers don't mean anything when you're dealing with humans. It's not their ships, their weapons, or even their size you should fear, it's their minds. Their cunning, their unpredictability, that's what makes them deadly. Their strength lies in their ability to think faster and adapt quicker than anyone. The room grew quiet, the weight of his words sinking in. Dranok paused, memories of past battles flashing behind his eyes. He had been there, in the thick of it, when he first encountered the Iron Reapers, when he had barely survived. "You've all studied the Battle of Karos," he said, his voice taking on a darker, more serious tone. "But theory means nothing compared to what I witnessed firsthand." The name sent a ripple through the cadets. Karos was a name synonymous with defeat, a place where a small human fleet had obliterated a much larger and more advanced coalition force. The cadets leaned forward in anticipation, eager to hear the real story from the one who had lived through it. Dranok switched the projection, revealing a simulated image of the battlefield. "We thought we had them cornered," he said, his voice a low growl. 20 of our best warships against only 5 human vessels. The odds were in our favor, or so we thought. A green-skinned cadet, his face etched with disbelief, spoke up. "But sir, how could they?" "They tricked us," Dranok cut him off, his tone harsh. "Humans are far more cunning than we gave them credit for. They baited us, letting us believe we had the upper hand. When we surged forward, confident in our overwhelming firepower, they responded like predators, silent, deadly, and patient." The holoprojector displayed the human fleet moving in a slow, deliberate formation, their ships navigating through a debris field. "They lured us into a choke point." Dranok continued, "An area so dense with wreckage that our ships struggled to maneuver. But not the Reapers. They moved through the chaos as if they had planned it all along." His voice grew darker, his posture rigid with the memory of that fateful moment. "Then they struck. Torpedoes, railguns, plasma bursts, every weapon at their disposal. But the true horror wasn't their firepower." Dranok's voice dropped to a whisper. "It was how quickly they adapted." One of the cadets dared to ask, "What do you mean, sir?" "They learned," Dranok replied, his tone as grim as the battle itself. "Within minutes, they analyzed our formations, our tactics. They exploited every single flaw. We lost 5 ships before we even understood what was happening." Shock rippled through the room. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard of the unpredictability of human warfare, but never in such chilling detail. "Humans don't fight by the rules," Dranok growled, his eyes narrowing. "They don't adhere to the rigid doctrines or protocols that we follow. They improvise, adapt, and change their strategies in the heat of battle. One minute you think you've outmaneuvered them, the next they're turning your own tactics against you." The holoprojector showed a Reaper ramming into one of Dranok's ships. "They don't care about losses. They'll sacrifice everything: ships, resources, even their own lives if it means winning." The room was suffocatingly silent now, every cadet fully immersed in Dranok's grim tale. They had all heard about the Tan Fleet's ruthless efficiency, but hearing it from someone who had lived through the experience was far more sobering. "You're not just fighting their ships," Dranok said, his voice cold and deliberate. "You're fighting their minds, and that is what makes them terrifying." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "Tomorrow, you'll study their weapons systems, their ship designs, and their tactics. But none of that will matter if you don't understand this. The true weapon of humanity isn't their technology, it's their ability to think. And that is sharper than any blade or cannon." The holoprojector flickered back to life, casting the room in a blue hue as it displayed the next phase of the battle. Dranok's fists clenched. "We thought we were ready," he said, bitterness seeping into his words. "5 of our best tacticians, trained in every scenario. But none of that prepared us for humans." The display shifted to the chaotic moments of the battle: plasma arrays, shock missiles, and energy beams lighting up the debris field. We unleashed everything we had. The battlefield was ablaze with explosions. It should have been the end for them. A cadet at the front, breathless with anticipation, leaned in. "But they survived, didn't they?" Dranok's expression hardened. "They didn't just survive. They thrived. When the smoke cleared, they were on us, moving faster than we could react." The display showed human ships emerging from the wreckage, seemingly unscathed. "They predicted our attack," Dranok explained. "They shielded themselves just enough to survive the worst of it, and while we were reloading, they counterattacked without hesitation." The projection showed the Reapers diving into the Coalition fleet, their weapons roaring to life. "They tore through our formation like predators among prey," Dranok continued, his voice rising with intensity. "Their tactics weren't static. When one ship was damaged, the others closed ranks to protect it. They moved as one, never giving us a moment to regroup." Tension gripped the room as Dranok described how ship after ship fell to the relentless human onslaught. "We panicked," he said, his voice full of raw emotion. "Ships collided, weapons misfired. My own ship barely escaped their torpedoes, but many weren't so lucky." The display dimmed, leaving only the smoldering wreckage of Dalvian ships. And when it was over, Dranok whispered, "We were broken. 5 human ships against 20 of ours, and they emerged victorious." The room was deathly still, the cadets stunned into silence. They had read the tactical reports, but nothing had prepared them for the full horror of facing the humans. Dranok took a step forward, his voice a low growl. "You want to know how they win? How they can defeat superior forces, outnumbered and outgunned?" His gaze swept over the room, cold and unrelenting. "Humans fight like they have nothing to lose. They use every resource, every tactic, every ounce of cunning at their disposal. And when you think you've beaten them, that's when they're most dangerous." The cadets could hardly breathe as Dranok delivered his final lesson. "They don't fear death," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They fear failure." The lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the room. Dranok paced in front of the stunned cadets, his expression grim. The Battle of Karos wasn't just a defeat. It was a lesson we didn't understand until it was too late. He turned and looked directly into the eyes of the young officers. "Humans don't fight like anyone else. Their strength isn't in their ships, their weapons, or their numbers. It's in their adaptability. They learn faster than any other species. They take your best tactics, your best weapons, and they use them against you." The tension in the room was palpable, the cadets hanging on his every word. "We had the advantage," Dranok continued, his voice laced with regret. "But it didn't matter. They think faster, they act faster. And when you make a mistake, they exploit it without mercy." One cadet, voice trembling, asked, "But sir, how do we defeat them?" Dranok stared at him for a long moment before turning back to the holoprojector, where the Iron Reaper loomed menacingly in the projection. "You don't," he said softly. "Not unless you learn to think like them." The room buzzed with confusion, but Dranok silenced it with a wave of his hand. "This isn't about firepower or fleet strength. It's about the mind. Humans win because they outthink their enemies. If you want to survive, you'll have to do the same." He deactivated the holoprojector, plunging the room into darkness once more. Remember this, Dranok said, his voice echoing in the silence. The greatest weapon of the human fleet isn't their ships or their guns, it's their ability to learn, adapt, and turn your strengths into your weaknesses. With that, he stepped away from the podium, his final words lingering in the air. And if you ever find yourself facing the Tan fleet, start praying. The room remained in stunned silence as Commander Dranok turned and left, leaving the cadets to contemplate the terrifying lesson they had just been taught.